Let's talk about a popular naming convention called BEM, which is short for Block Element Modifier. The idea of BEM is to think of our web page as a bunch of blocks or components or modules. These blocks can contain elements and can be modified. Let me walk you through a real example. Look at this web page. This piece of UI that we have here is called a block or a component or a module. As you can see, this block is repeated in multiple places. So we can build these building blocks and then compose them together to build a real complex web page. Now I've got a question for you. What other building blocks do you see here? Think about it for a few seconds. Here's the answer. We have buttons. Again, they're repeated. We have lists in this particular style with green ticks. We also have badges. So these badges are repeated. And here's another example of a badge. So these are the individual building blocks on this page. Now, back to the original building block. We call this block a card. Now, a card can contain elements like a header. In this header, we can have other elements like the price, the billing cycle, and a description. These elements only make sense in the context of this block. In other words, the price with this particular style or the billing cycle doesn't make sense outside of this block. So a block can contain elements or other blocks. Now, a block can also be modified. So here's the standard version of our cards, but here's a different version with a different background color and the popular badge. So let's see how we can use the BEM convention for naming the classes for these elements. So we're going to start by adding a div with the class of card. Now this card can have a header element. So we add a header. Now we want to give this a class, so we don't have to use the element type in our selectors. But what should we call this class? We don't want to use a generic name like header, because as I told you before, somewhere else we can have a rule for this class, and the styles defined there would leak into this element. We don't want that. Now, earlier I told you that we can use a prefix like this. That's totally fine, but using the BEM convention, we have to separate these two parts using two underscores. So first we add the name of the block, followed by two underscores and the name of the element. Now, inside the header, we might have a span for the price element. So a span, now what should we call this class? Are we going to say card, header, price? Well, that's way too long and unnecessary. This price element is part of this card, so we can simplify this to card price. Now, next to the header, we can have a div with the class of card, _, body. And in the body, we can have a button. So button. Now, what is going to be the name of this class? Is it going to be card, _, button? No, because button is an independent block or component that can exist outside of this block. So we're going to drop the prefix. Good. Now, earlier I told you that BEM is short for Block Element Modifier. So we covered blocks and elements, but what about modifiers? Well, you saw that we can have different versions of our cards. So here's the standard version and here's the popular version. This is an example of a modifier. So back to our markup. If you want to make this card a popular card, we have to give it an extra class called card, _ popular. So we use double hyphens to separate a block from a modifier and two underscores to separate a block from an element. This is the BEM convention. Now, initially you might think this is a bit verbose, but trust me, the more you use it, the more you're going to appreciate it. And if you don't like it at all, that's totally fine. You can use any convention that you prefer. But BEM is a convention that a lot of projects use. That's why I covered it in this course.